On Saturday, November 2nd, starting at noon, Kevin Williams is helping sick kids by playing video games. He needs your help to raise $1,000 for the CHIO Foundation. Donate at extra-life.org/participants/347875.
Lights, camera, action. Cut!
Welcome to Ropes to Reels, part of the WrestleMedia Network. Brought to you by our Patreon. Patreons, I can't remember what we have to come up with a dang name for these people. Don't you agree, Jeff?
Yes. I typically call them kids because I'm a dinosaur around here. So everyone's a kid to me now. I'm officially in my 40s, which is slightly depressing.
So whenever you give out content to our Patreons, do you say, "Here's looking at you, kid"?
No, but maybe I should start.
Yes. If nothing else, this is what we've accomplished today.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind next time I do a Forging the Future.
There you go. So anyways, this is Ropes to Reels without any Adam, so there's no structure here. I've been given notes on what to do, and I will follow them as much as my heart will contend. As expected.
I was half expecting you to say, I was given notes on what to do, and I immediately burned them.
Well, it was digital notes. I didn't.
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't want to burn my computer.
True.
But that's what they call a firewall. So, we are doing an episode, Jeff and I, for the first time, though you and I have talked back and forth about doing something. Mm-hmm. I will leave the floor to you to explain why that is.
Well, in the realm of WrestleMedia, you and I are probably the biggest comic nerds around. And I will freely admit that you probably swim circles around me, but I'm one of those people, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm one of those people that, with my friends who aren't really into comics, I'm their token comic nerd friend, but then with friends of mine who are into comics, a lot of times they have a bigger wealth of knowledge than I do. Like I'm not the type of person who can rhyme off, issue number 573 of Spider-Man did this and that, So, but I like my funny books.
There you go. Yes, we enjoy the funny books, and this was the start of the funny movies.
It was.
That's right, because for Ropes to Reels this week, we're going to be looking at the first Iron Man, released back in 2008, which still hurts my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how aged I would feel, like how old I would feel watching this movie. In the first 5 minutes, he says, "Don't put this on MySpace."
Right? Yeah, I have that in my notes. But before we get into that, I believe there is a very important question that needs to be asked.
Yes, but since I have the answer, I do believe it's your responsibility to ask me.
All right. Well, what in the auspicious arc reactors does this have to do with professional wrestling?
Love the alliteration. Do you know the name Lana Starr?
It sounds somewhat familiar, yes.
Lana Starr is a professional women's wrestler for the Women of Wrestling.
Oh!
And she shows up in this movie. Can you guess where?
I'm not 100%. I'm going to guess probably the party scenes or like the Vegas stuff.
Oh, yes. She is in the party scenes, but around a very important man. She is one of the ladies who Stan Lee has his arm around.
Stan the man, of course.
She's got the MVP invite.
I'll be honest, when you first told me we were going to be doing this movie and I didn't know what the connection was, my first thought was, is there like a news story in the movie that has like Maria Menounos? That was my first thought.
Why?
Well, she's wrestled at WrestleMania. Technically, she counts.
Oh, I guess that would... All right, this is going to have to go into one of those rules where Adam and I just kind of like sit down for like a solid 10 minutes and discuss. Because we're on the fence about Drew Carey. Because technically, he's in the Hall of Fame, and he has wrestled in a ring, but it's just like a fine line because he's... I don't know. Well, it's one of those tricky ones.
Would you consider Mike Tyson counting?
No.
Okay, well then, he falls in the same category as Drew Carey. That's fair. That's understandable. And I was just trying to figure it out because I must have glossed past the Lana Star name in the credits, or maybe she goes by her legit name. I don't think her real last name is Star. Maybe it is. But I'm rambling on now. But yes, okay. That is very interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that scene and actually keep a better eye out for her.
And just remember that Robert Downey Jr. was the most charming man on the planet at this point. This was before he got PTSD and like, oh, I don't want to be the last one alive, but I'm probably going to be the last one alive. Like getting real heavy with it. He was just having fun and shooting Middle Eastern men.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I wanted to bring up. So in the vein of political correctness, do you think this movie has aged well?
I've seen ones that have aged worse.
That's very true. But in the context of like just Middle Eastern blanket bad, and of course this was at the height of the
exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
The issue. It's the war in Afghanistan. So was it kind of propaganda? Did they not do it justice, or was it just so far enough in the background that it can be forgiven? What do you think?
I'm gonna say somewhere in the middle. Like, I mean, rewatching it recently, I didn't get overly uncomfortable with it, but I do understand that it's a product of its time. I think it can almost get a bit of a pass being a comic book film as well, to an extent. I mean, you have everything with the 10 rings and various organizations and things like that. And I mean, look at everything with Captain America always had to do with the Nazis. So you always kind of pick the token bad guy of the time. And unfortunately, at that time, the Middle East was considered quote unquote the bad guy. I mean, look at WrestleMania 8 with Sergeant Slaughter and Hulk Hogan. Or wait, no, sorry, that was 7. I apologize.
Just don't worry. You know how you say that even when you look at comic books and you name issue, I don't know what happens? Mm-hmm. That's how I feel around you people with wrestling. You'll just randomly say, Starrcade, 1996. It was Ric Flair versus the Midnight Mogul in a Dogs Fight Anywhere match. And I'll be like, cool, I'll just take your word for it. So at least I've got one up on you with like the comic book stuff, but gee, you guys got a wisdom all your own.
That's fair. But yeah, it really is. It is tricky, and especially when obviously you see who the actual villain of this film is, it kind of changes that a little bit, and it sort of has the whole Middle Eastern thing being kind of like the lackeys and not the actual big bad.
Yeah, that is fair. Kind of just making them blanket trope bad. That's the thing. If they were given like a full-fledged character arc that was just like irredeemable, then you got a little bit of an issue. But I think they were far enough in the background, because the thing about comics is if you don't stick to the lore, you're going to have a bunch of people mad at you. And really the whole thing about Tony is he got stuck in a war, saw what his creations were doing, and decided, I'm going to make a creation for peace by making the ultimate weapon. So they did have to take him to some war, and to keep it... Did I lose you?
Apparently, yes. I just kept recording, though.
Yeah, so we're just... So what we're doing... Where do you live, Jeff?
I live in Orangeville, Ontario.
Orangeville, Ontario. I live in North Bay, Ontario. And that's about how far away, Jeff?
3 hours on a good day, keeping a healthy click. Probably more like 3.5.
3.5 hours. So we're on the phone with each other, recording on our microphones. And phones are irreliable bastards. Is that a word? Irreliable?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Unreliable. That's the word.
Yeah, okay.
So the call was dropped. He is back. I don't remember what I was saying. What was I saying? You weren't on the phone.
We were still doing the Middle Eastern thing and kind of getting to the tail end of that.
And I can't remember where I was going. I kind of trailed off.
Well, then you know what? Let me segue into something else. Speaking of phones, and speaking earlier about how dated this is, hey, would it be cool if I got a picture with you? The dude had an actual camera. How often do you see that anymore? People don't take selfies with actual cameras anymore. That stuck out to me, and I'm like, oh wow, this is so dated.
And just think, in 10 years' time, there's going to be a movie where his glasses are the camera.
Yeah, no, exactly.
My God. But the thing is, while we talk about dating, can we talk about a major shine of this movie?
Absolutely.
The effects. Man, those hold up.
So much. And that's one thing I was...
up for the...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, continue.
I was just going to say, that's one thing I was kind of watching out for, because, I mean, obviously, you know, we saw Avengers Endgame recently, and Stark's been involved in a lot of the movies lately, like the Spider-Man ones and stuff like that. So I wanted to see what the suits looked like at this time. And man, yeah, they do still hold up.
Yeah, I mean, there's you can kind of see little fleckles here, and there's a little bit of shine and shadow, but you have to really dig deep to find it. If you look back on movies that were made 3 years ago, you could find flaws. But this was 10. This was 2008. And it looks good. I was watching it on a DVD. I don't even have the Blu-ray, and it looked good.
Yeah. No, for sure. I was half expecting, because I watched the DVD as well, I was half expecting, turning on the movie, like, oh, is Iron Man going to look like he does in the like, DVD menu here, where it's very, like, digital? But no, it still holds up, and, like, and things you don't think of, especially when you see the Mark II suit, is how well, like, even just the reflections in the suit to the environment around and everything, it just looks so crisp.
I do appreciate the idea of him flying at night for the first thing, so that way any digital flares could be hidden. But at the same time, it added to it because he's hiding the secret identity. Do you have any? That was my biggest shine. What was yours?
Well, that was one thing I was going to say. Another, I really liked the pacing of the film. You know, they could have very easily spent too much time in that early flashback scene trying to portray Stark as the piece of garbage that he was at the time, or, you know, done the cave stuff too quickly. But I found everything was paced out really, really well, and they didn't linger too long anywhere, and they didn't shortcut too much. I mean, obviously it's a movie, you only have 2 hours to kind of tell your story, but I found everything moved along at a healthy pace.
You know, it's funny, I was reading an article recently that was saying the original script had him post-war. Like, the whole story was going to be, is he Iron Man? And the whole thing was you wouldn't see both of them in the same room together, and they were going to try and make it a mystery, and then you slowly piece together what happened to Tony after the war. And the more I read it, the more I went, oh my, this is garbage. This is a terrible idea. And then Tom Cruise left, and then holy jumpins, here comes all the good things that Kevin Feige brings to the table.
Absolutely. That's another interesting thing. This isn't necessarily a shine per se, but one thing is just thinking about how much everything has changed, and I don't just mean the Marvel Cinematic Universe itself, but even that. Like, this is so grounded compared to having Skrulls and Thanos, and, like, especially after having just watched Endgame, like a month ago, and then going back and watching this, and how grounded and down to earth and real this movie is. I mean, obviously, how much of a genius he is and how quickly he can whip together, you know, a suit of flying armor is slightly unrealistic, but at the same time, in the scope of that versus Aliens, like, it's kind of crazy.
And when you think about the progression of the movies as well, so you have the Tony Stark builds a suit of armor. Cool, I believe it. Then we go to the Incredible Hulk and Thor and Captain America, and it really doesn't stop to lose its grounded nature until Guardians of the Galaxy, where James Gunn was like, I just want to do weird stuff.
Yep.
And then he did weird stuff. Like, our main character just has a half-naked pink lady underneath his floorboards. Yeah. So we're just going to go all balls to the wall with it now. But yeah, it starts out so, I guess, realistic? Or at least it builds a world that you immediately immerse yourself in that follows similar rules, and you invest it.
Yeah. And it gets me thinking that really Iron Man was probably the perfect choice to kick this off. a lot of people criticized it, and at the time, probably me too, because I didn't know a whole lot about Iron Man. I'm like, billionaire guy, suit of armor, former alcoholic. Yeah, I get it. I didn't really read a lot of Iron Man comics at the time, and I think a lot of people were kind of in that way, but it just goes to show that they had this vision kind of from the start, and this was the most grounded, kind of realistic approach they could enter into this universe. The only other one that I think kind of would have worked the same way might have been if they had started with Cap instead.
Yeah, but Cap is such a fantastical story that takes place out of time that I don't think it would have worked as well.
No, I agree.
Because with Tony, you've got the modern era that seeps you in and gives you the familiarity, where with Cap, you really have to start in 1940s, where I don't think anybody in the 1940s cares about Captain America. You got to get the kids involved first.
Exactly.
Got to get them invested.
Yeah.
My next shine, it's Robert frickin' Downey Jr.
Mm-hmm.
So, a funny story. When this movie first came out, I'm like a nerd, so I knew about Tony Stark, and I'm ready to go and watch this movie. And my mother goes, Robert Downey Jr., really? And then she actually tells me the story of that man's life, of the mistakes he made, of just the kind of person that he was, and how, like, he was nominated for an Academy Award for Chaplin and doesn't remember making half the movie because he was so coked out of his mind. And then when she's done telling the story, I just say, well, I mean, it's kind of Tony Stark. I think this will work.
Yeah.
And then after the movie, she's like, yeah, that worked. It was just such a perfect that could have derailed so heavily, but could you possibly imagine anybody else as Tony Stark now?
Oh,
10 years later.
Not. Absolutely not.
It's just perfect.
Yeah.
It worked out so well for everybody.
100%. And that was one of the real big selling points when he was on board, is a lot of people who did know the comics and did know that history of Tony Stark, we were all like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. So it really was perfect, and he really did knock it out of the park. Like, this wouldn't have even been the same just without him at all.
Did you also chuckle when Rhodes said, next time, baby?
Yeah. First time, and still every time.
I don't think I'll ever not just have a slight chuckle in my voice when he says that.
Yeah. I marked out huge. I remember whenever the first time I saw it, I marked out real big for that because I at least did, like I said, I have a passing knowledge of Iron Man back at this time. So I knew about War Machine and everything. So seeing the silver armor, and he's like, oh, next time, baby. And I was like, yes!
We could actually see it, and then we do see it. And honestly, it's much different from what's portrayed in the comics, and I kind of dig it.
Yeah.
I really dig what they've done with War Machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
I don't think we're ever going to be able to get there in Ropes to Reels, so we might as well just talk Iron Man 3 for a second, because while you marked out for War Machine, when I heard the 10 rings, I'm like, okay, I might actually do the Mandarin. And then they actually did the Mandarin. And what do you think about the Mandarin reveal in Iron Man 3?
At first, I was disappointed. I really was, because it was a shock thing and everything, and I really wanted the real Mandarin, and I loved everything that Ben Kingsley had done up to that point. Like, I loved the cadence in his voice and everything. So I was looking forward to his portrayal, and then when they did that, I was like, oh, well, that's too bad. But then over time, I've gotten over it, and I'm cool with that, and I'm cool with the way they did it. But at the time, I was like, oh, just because I loved everything he had done so much, it kind of took it away.
No, that's absolutely fair. A lot of people like being swerved to bring it back to professional wrestling. They like to know what's going on, kind of anticipate it, and see where it goes from there.
Mm-hmm.
I very much hated this movie for years and years, and I love Shane Black films, so I really had no excuse. But I watched it again for my rewatch leading up to Infinity War, and as an Iron Man movie, it's terrible. As a Tony Stark film, it's brilliant. You analyze Tony Stark as a character, and you look at the Mandarin as kind of the reverse Iron Man.
Yeah.
Because Mandarin builds himself up to be like this larger-than-life figure. Oh, my dog's whining at the door. I probably got to take him out. Oh, don't poop on the carpet. Don't poop on the carpet! Hang on, pause. And with some fancy editing later, I'm back. Just when we just taught him to whine at the door, and I'm like, oh yes, I have to reward this, but also podcast.
Yeah. This is why I'm doing this while my 3-year-old is napping.
So let's not try and wake him.
Because we don't need him whining at the door.
Hey, you can train your kid to go to the bathroom any way you wish.
Fair enough.
Anyways, just wanted to do a quick little thing on Iron Man 3.
Yeah, I might have to go back and give that a rewatch, because that was definitely my least favorite of the 3 Iron Man movies, and I remember being very surprised when a lot of reviews were calling it like the best one, and I'm like, really?
Certainly not the best one. The first one is the best one, in my opinion at least.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But yeah, it is worth a rewatch. I think now, especially after Endgame, I think Iron Man 3 deserves some more attention.
I have it, so I'll probably do that, because I'm on my quest now to get them all, because I kind of fell off buying the Blu-rays and DVDs. So I'm trying to complete my collection again, up to Endgame at least, and I'm almost there. So I do have it, so I'll probably give it a rewatch when I find some time. Another shine that I had, I suppose it would be cinematography. I'm not the cinephile that you and Adam are, but to use an example, I loved the reveals of each set of armor. Like, I know Tony fought in the cave with the first one for a bit, but then, you know, whenever he steps out of the cave and you actually get to see it in the daylight right before he starts just lighting up the evil army there, and then you have the Mark II when he puts it on and it slowly starts at the feet and it's kind of the camera's sort of spinning around him and you see it, and then you get, you know, the reveal of the Mark III, which is the red and gold, and yes, you saw the picture of it on the computer, but to actually see it in action, like those reveals and like the pose when he lands that first time he goes to use the armor to take out the army, and it's just it was really well shot. So I really enjoyed that, and it was kind of nice going back and remembering like some of those iconic shots that we've seen so many times in subsequent movies, but for like the first time.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right, it is the cinematography. It's the way it's lit and shot and directed. They knew to sell Iron Man. Mm-hmm. They knew that they had to build it up. They can't just have him constantly be fighting. They have to slowly show you what it's all about. And the reveal in the desert is probably the best introduction to a superhero that I could figure.
Yeah.
A relatively unknown superhero. Like, you can make the argument for when Cap shows up or in Winter Soldier or subsequent movies, but this is the first time you're truly getting to see what Iron Man is capable of. Mm-hmm. It is a full-on introduction to the character that, in my opinion, is my favorite scene of the movie, where he shows up and just kind of lays waste, protecting this town, shoots a tiny missile at a tank and blows it up and walks away. It's just, that whole scene is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. It just goes to show the progression of the character and how, you know, he was this selfish guy and he realized that he can't just stand back and let things happen. And I'm actually reminded of a Dusty Rhodes quote, since Double or Nothing was recently, that just started going through my head as I was watching this character progression of Tony Stark. And that is, hard times breed better men. It's a Dusty Rhodes quote, and it just made me, I just had that going through my head as I was watching this character arc of Tony Stark through this first movie.
So with that all out, all of the things we adored, was there anything that you just kind of lulled over or thought, that wasn't really done as well?
I don't think so. Like I said, it definitely was a little dated, which for some reason I kind of wasn't expecting, so that caught me a little off guard right off the bat. But there wasn't really anything I hated, I don't think, no.
Yeah, it's not... the only times that it tends to slow down is with the other characters, especially with Pepper Potts. When she is on screen without Tony Stark, it tends to drawl a little on. But that's only because you have such an enigmatic figure in Robert Downey Jr. and a powerhouse of Jeff Bridges that somebody's going to have to take the low road.
Oh, absolutely.
Somebody's going to have to be the weak link.
Absolutely. And I mean, I have no problem with like Gwyneth Paltrow's role and you know, how she portrayed the character in the film, but when that's the company you're keeping, yeah, it's hard to keep up sometimes, for sure.
And quick note on Jeff Bridges. A lot of people critique him for going over the top with it. I think the man fights crime in a suit of armor. Have some fun.
Yeah.
He is. You should too.
You're a supervillain, you know? You kind of have to go over the top a little bit. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of scenery chewing.
Especially when Mr. Bridges is the one doing it. So, do you have anything else you'd like to add about this film?
I think that covered pretty much everything. It's weird to look back at a film like this and think of the fact that like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter were all in its infancy when this film came out, and Instagram wasn't even a thing yet. That's kind of weird to think about.
Do you want to know what's even weirder?
What?
The iPad hadn't come out.
Oh, wow.
Right? So much of our life is just dedicated to tablets, but there wasn't even tablets out. Tony Stark invented the tablet before it was a thing.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Stark.
Oh, also, one more thing. The best insult in the MCU. I help Stark with whatever I need, and sometimes that requires taking out the trash. Will that be all?
Yes!
Nobody has been burned as hard since Mandarin's reveal. Hey, this is a commercial for patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, where you can get early access to episodes of your favorite WrestleMedia shows, get full uncut and uncensored versions of your favorite shows, and more. Don't want to hear this commercial on your podcast anymore? Sign up at our main event tier and get these episodes ad-free. Want to hear your own commercial here instead of ours? We've got tiers for that too. Visit patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and join the WrestleMedia revolution today.
Let's go back to Iron Man and talk about our personal reviews. What did you think about the film?
Yeah, I can't even bury the lead here. It's a main event through and through. I was a little worried going back and watching it, how it might be dated to an extent and how it would stack up against other subsequent Marvel Universe films. But it still holds up. I still had a great time with this. I kind of laughed off, the camera and the pre-Facebook technology and things like that. But overall, I still had a great time watching this. Whether it's, 2019 or 2008, it still holds up. It's fantastic in every way, and it shows you why Robert Downey Jr. was like the backbone of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and why Iron Man, Tony Stark was the main star. This movie is what kicked it all off, and it just goes to show it was well deserved. Loved it, main event through and through.
I am going to compare it to a main eventer, and I'd like your help because I can't remember his name.
Okay.
It was in AEW. He won the Battle Royal. What was his name?
Oh,
Hangman?
Hangman Adam Page, a guy I've become a big fan of recently.
Hangman Adam Page. I'd never heard of this man until AEW, and I was watching the Battle Royal. And when he won, my first thought was, he looks like a main eventer. They had established him so well. He has the look to where he sold me, which is what Iron Man did. Iron Man just kind of shows up, does his thing, knows that he's good at what he does, displays it for all to see, and it works. It works on the stage. Everything just kind of fell into place. Right? Hangman works because this is a high-profile match, and even if you don't know it, people are watching, so it's time for you to kick this off, which he did fantastically, and this movie does as well, and it holds up the test of time. Now, I don't know if Mr. Page is going to be around for 10 years' time putting on a classic such as Endgame, but I really hope he does. I am a very big fan of the man immediately, as I was a fan of Iron Man as soon as this movie ended. I also consider it a main event.
That's very good. Actually, a very good comparison that I never thought of.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Ropes to Reels.
Oh, it was my pleasure. We'll have to do this again sometime. It's also good that it's something that's a little bit in my wheelhouse, like a comic book movie. One of these days, though, we'll have to do one of the Scooby-Doo movies that Adam doesn't want to touch, because that's another thing you and I have in common, is we're both big fans of Scooby-Doo, so...
Well, I don't know if we can do Scooby-Doo, but I hear there's a Jetsons movie that we're going to have to watch at some point.
We'll have to give that one a try and let Adam have a break, because I know how much he enjoyed that Flintstones one.
Oh, he loves it so much. And speaking of Adam on a break, he's also going to be taking next week off, and here's where I will tease what's happening next week. I have no idea. I'm trying to come up with a plan, but so far nothing's come to mind, so I'm going to get plastered one night, come up with a bunch of random ideas, choose the one I like the most, and I will see you next week for an episode of Ropes to Reels that surely will not be forgotten. Thanks again for coming on, Jeff.
Oh, thank you for having me, and that is a great hook. I can't wait for next week now.
And when it comes to the Iron Man movie released in 2008, well, that's a wrap.
This has been a presentation of WrestleMedia, where everything is wrestling and wrestling is everything. Here's what you're missing out on right now over at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca.
Fun fact number 2. The script was not completely finished when filming began.
Huh. So they were still writing at the time of filming, so it's kind of like an episode of Raw.
Kind of, just with better booking.
Want more? Sign up now at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca.